Hello and welcome to the round so far for round 16, brought to you by Amy. I'm Xander McGuire and I'm joined by Kate McCarthy. We start at Marvel Stadium tonight, where football fans around the country were daring to dream as the seconds tick down in the third quarter. Could 18th place West Coast cause the boil-over of the season? But a late dump kick out landed in the hands of Dan Houston. He bombed one in trademark style from outside 50, and that started a run-on for the Pies, which ended those hopes for West Coast.
It certainly did. Collingwood ended up 29-point winners, but that clip from the last part where Dan Houston ended up kicking that goal right on the stroke of three-quarter time, it was a little bit of the tail of the tape for the West Coast Eagles. The moment in which they could ill afford to make mistakes. They ended up either fumbling or missing a really important tackle or doing that, turning the ball straight over to a Collingwood player. They were able to pounce. So you just felt little mistakes that they made throughout the night. Did let Collingwood off the hook at times, but you'd be pretty happy as a West Coast Eagle fan watching their pressure, their ability to pressure the Collingwood Magpies, and little efforts like this we saw all throughout the night, really, Xander. Their pressure, they were up for the fight. They made Collingwood work hard for it, and they did. They're 18th, Collingwood are first, and they pushed them all the way. And I think you could be nothing but sort of impressed by the standards that they set for themselves tonight, and were able to, when you're coming up against a team that is first on the ladder, and you're where West Coast are, this is the one non-negotiable that you've got, that's pressure, and they executed that tonight.
Now, this is a side that's won one game so far this season. You look at this effort, and you do mention the missed opportunities, and with a young side, you expect that. But you would expect them to win more than, maybe one or two games for the rest of the season with the effort that they showed.
Yeah, certainly, and that has to be a sort of a benchmark for them now. That anything less than that pressure, we'll talk about North Melbourne in a minute, but their ability to not sustain that pressure week in, week out is shown. And as a team that's down the bottom of the ladder, that is the one thing you need to bring week in, week out.
Beyond effort, it looks like they've found a budding star in Tom McCarthy, the number one pick in the mid-season draft, who has exploded onto the scene in his first two games of AFL footy.
Yeah, well, he had 31 on debut against Carlton pre-bye, and then he came out this evening, had another 29 disposals, 19 of those uncontested, and 639 metres gained. But he just looks so comfortable at the level. He looks comfortable with ball in hand, his ability to use it. That kick there was very much like a Bailey Dale kick coming out of the halfback. So is that one. So his confidence, his ability with ball in hand to pick the right target, I've been nothing but impressed by him, and two of the better games to the start of the career for any player.
Not bad to be likened to Bailey Dale after your second game, is it? A quick talking point out of this one, and it revolves around the holding the ball interpretation, which has been such a big talking point all through the year. We have a look at this vision where Ned Long was taken a task, did about a 7.20, wasn't pinged for any sort of holding the ball opportunity. The ball goes straight to Liam Duggan. He's pinned straight away, one arm unavailable to handball the footy off, and he is pinged by the umpire for holding the ball. Now, this isn't to attack the umpires here, but it just goes to show how complex the interpretation of holding the ball is. And it's fast becoming one of the key issues that Greg Swan is going to have to address when he gets back from the UK in the coming weeks and starts his job here at AFL House. But it's tough for the umpires, this interpretation, isn't it, Kate?
It is, because technically both... I struggle with the first one not being holding the ball. I think that went on for a little bit too long. But the second one, for just the start comparison in 10 seconds of play, where a player's taken on two or three opponents, eventually does get a handball out, and then someone takes possession, but because they've got one arm pinged, they need to be able to either drop it on the boot or get rid of it in a way that's a correct disposal to then be pinged. I think the start comparisons are pretty telling in that clip.
To Tassie, where Hawthorn smashed North Melbourne to the tune of 85 points. And that takes us to our Saturday star, a man who has just wound back the clock time and time again this season, Jack Gunston.
Well, he's played 272 games, but he has never kicked 7 goals in a game. And tonight he was able to do that. He played a very good game of football. I think poor old Toby Pink, the Pink Pony Club, will be a bit disappointed because Jack Gunston, he got hold of him early. They looked to change the match up late, but they didn't have any answers for him. He was brilliant. 7 goals, as I said. He's kicked 6 on multiple occasions, kicked 6 this year against Port Adelaide as well. And look at all of the Hawthorn players knew about it, holding up the 7. You remember when he kicked his 500? They all came out with 500. So relive that one. They did speak about it at three-quarter time that he'd never gotten to 7. So he was pretty happy to get to 7.
A tough night for the North Melbourne defence, but it was a wide spread. Jack Gunston kicked 7 goals, but there were 20 kicked between the 5 notable forwards in Gunston, Chol, Ramsden, who came into the side, kicked 3. The Wiz and Jack Ginnivan, and Marbiot Chol was pretty happy with his performance as well. But it's an even spread, and as a Hawthorn fan at the moment, leading into the latter stages of the year, that's exactly what you want to see.
Yeah, and I think just to focus on the key forwards as well, you've got those performances, and then you've got this guy who's just played his first game back since his ACL injury. Mitch Lewis flying for the footy, taking a nice grab. He kicked 2 in the VFL. And Cal Shadir as well, he kicked 2 himself, but the most impressive part for me, he had 12 marks in the VFL game as well. So the start of the year, you probably looked, or we definitely looked at the Hawthorn lineup and said, look, they're forward half, they're smalls, they're chock full of good smalls that can hit the scoreboard. The question is around the tools and the keys. And the last few weeks, you have seen, I guess, growth in Chol, his ability to hit the scoreboard. Ramsden, he kicked 3 this evening. Yep. He's never kicked more than 1 goal in his 7 games. And obviously Gunston hitting the scoreboard 7 times. So it is one of those things with those players now coming back through the VFL. I expect Mitch Lewis to play a few weeks in VFL to get his match fitness up and get right. But yeah, they're going to have an interesting decision, but a good decision to make, a good dilemma when it comes to the selection table for key forwards. Lewis
is probably the guy. Does Deer come back in at the expense of one of the tools?
I think he'll have to perform in a way that obviously pushes his case, but 12 marks, 2 goals. For someone that you need to compete all around the ground, he's done nothing but put his case forward.
To add injury to insult for North Melbourne, George Wardlaw suffered a 3rd concussion in the space of just 35 games today. An incident with Connor Nash there, where the contact isn't overly exaggerated, but the shoulder does hit him in the head there in what is generally a pretty fair contest. He was assessed straight away, went down to the rooms, and eventually taken out of the contest. So a guy that is so talented, who's had so many soft tissue injuries with explosive sort of explosion out of the contest with his hamstrings over the years, now has a concussion issue to add to that. And you wonder what North Melbourne do, whether they put him out of action for a bit of time to get him right for next season, or do they, take the 12-day concussion protocol and move on from there. Gold Coast. Up on the Gold Coast today, had a great win over the D's. They generally just got the better of a side that has struggled through the year, Melbourne. They showed their class, the Suns.
Yeah, so they got out of the gates super early in the first term. We've seen them do this, though, throughout 2025. Leading at quarter time, they've had 8 wins and just the 1 loss. When they trail at quarter time, 1 win and 4 losses. So they are a team that when they start hot, they continue that on, and they were just really hot early out of the gates. Melbourne, they were caught napping. They really were on the back foot. They conceded 8 marks inside forward 50. This was after making that decision to drop Jake Lever at the selection table to try and, I guess, get a little bit more assertive in their defensive half and make a bit of a stand. But yeah, it was a pretty poor showing in the first quarter from Melbourne, but all the more reason to celebrate Gold Coast Suns and what they were able to do in the first term.
Stephen May had a bit of a clumsy hit on Ben Ainsworth, and it seems to have been the theme of the round that there's been a fair bit of feeling across the board.
There has been. There's been little spot fires everywhere. I wouldn't be surprised if this could be some of the biggest fines that we see dished out in a round of football, because we saw it at the SCG, we saw it this afternoon. I think every game nearly has had a little bit of this in it, and just the cleverness from Ainsworth to just pick up the ball, take the advantage and run it all the way into the square to kick his goal. But it was just clumsy from Stephen May, nothing more than that. But you'd think if there's an incident like that, it's probably going to cause a few players to stick up for their teammate as well.
Now, it probably puts Melbourne out of the running for finals. We've been saying that the last couple of weeks, but this is probably the nail in the coffin for them, which takes us to an analysis of where the ladder sits right now. We know Gold Coast have a game in hand because of Cyclone Alfred at the start of the year, but it's so tight at the very top.
Yeah, it is, and I think this is probably one of the years in the 18-team era that we're going to see the team that actually earns that spot in 8th position is going to have to be probably winning the more games than they've ever had to win to hold on to that spot. Obviously, the top 9 there in really strong positions, 10th in Port Adelaide, but if we go back to 2016, that was the last time where, have a look at North Melbourne there on 8th, 40, and the next best team in 9th, 28 with Port Adelaide. So it's an interesting way that this has played out. I know a few weeks ago, or a month or so ago, we were almost saying that the top 8 was all but locked in. Yep. There was maybe one team that could float in and out, and it sort of still looks like that. 9th at the moment, GWS, but there is that game in hand.
And the Bulldogs winning from 7th on the ladder in 2016 as well just goes to show that anything could happen towards the pointy end of this season. Let's go to Amy Clangers now. Well, we've had a few comical moments through the round, and we start with Tom Papley. Kate, you were front and centre on the boundary.
Yes, well, this is classic Tom Papley. Absolutely filthy with the decision. Gives his opponent a spray there and then realises as he's gone to bend down that he's actually completely dislocated his finger, so he runs off, gets that all looked at, but he was too much in a rage to even realise that he's injured himself. Yeah. And then these two going at it. This is another one of these that you think there's going to be a fair few fines come out, or they have come out of it.
I think $3,000 for each of them for the two incidences in the last quarter.
Well, they're a little bit lighter in the pocket, and have a look at, speaking of lighter, Rory Lobb, a little bit lighter on the cardio as well, because he could not even make it to that next contest. So that went on for a while. There was a couple of different contests between those two, but it was pretty fun to watch, to be honest.
Fun to watch for those elements of the game, but also fun to watch because it was one of the best games of the season. It was the Bulldogs that triumphed by 9 points in Marcus Bontempelli's 250th game. Amazingly, though, it was the man they're calling the mini Bont who stole the spotlight, Joel Frazier, with the best game of his career by far so far.
Yeah, it was, and his ability to spend time in the midfield and the forward half is something that is becoming very valuable to the Bulldogs, and I just want you to watch his work rate. Obviously, as a forward here, just completely outworks his opponent, gets down, gets forward, gets on the end of one and ends up kicking 4 goals in this game, which is easily his career high. But it all comes from work rate. Here, again, in that mid-forward role, working in line with the contest, gets a handball out there but doesn't give up on the play, keeps running, keeps outworking his opponent, and then ends up getting back on the end of a chain here. And this bit here, this is when he is at his most damaging. When he's breaking the paint at 50, he is so hard to stop. He's one of the hardest men in the league to tackle as well when he gets a full steam ahead. And I just want to point out something that pre-bye, so we know at the start of the season, the Bulldogs had a whole number of injuries to key midfielders. Yep. So Bont, Treloar, there was a number of them that were out for a fair while. And so Frazier was the one that was the beneficiary of it. He played a lot of time midfield forward. That was the split, really. Yep. Then you go 3 weeks sort of post-bye. He's been moved back to defence and midfield. That's because of the additions, obviously. Bont working up his sort of work through the midfield, definitely getting more minutes through there. And Treloar was the one that had come back. Then you look at Friday night, so this is pre-Friday night's game. Yep. He's the one that when Treloar goes out of the team, he earns that midfield forward split again. Taking nothing away from Adam Treloar, and I think his run with that calf injury has been wretched, and I feel for him, but I think this could almost be a little bit of a blessing in disguise for their ability to now utilise Joel Frazier in that role for at least the next 6 weeks while Adam Treloar is trying to work his way back in. But he is someone that you need in the midfield and you need in the forward half. Stop using him out of the defensive line because he hits the scoreboard and he is dynamic. Always one of the great challenges when you have young players coming through that want to play in those established positions, but you've got so many superstars that are running around. But Joel Frazier was just incredible on Friday night. Now that leads us, staying in the same vein of Friday night, to a new segment that we're launching on the round so far this week, and that is Kate's Launch Zone. Kate, you've got a bee in your bonnet about one issue in particular. I do. It is the SCG turf, and quite frankly, I don't think this is quite good enough. I don't think it's up to standard. Let's have a look at some of the clips here. First of all, those two players are not running at any sort of speed to be able to lose their footing. Same there. This one here is the most damning for me, though. Bailey Williams, that is really dangerous. And then Nick Blakey can't even get his own footing when he's trying to kick that. And for me, it's not up to AFL standard. There's a game there next Sunday, Sydney and Fremantle. For me, they cannot play that game there. It is dangerous. If someone is to come out of that game next Sunday with a serious injury, the ramifications on that is quite large, I think. And you come from more of a news angle than I do, but seeing that, I don't think that's up to standard. I think it's dangerous for players. And if they play a game there next weekend knowing that, I think they're a little bit liable. Well, it's remarkable that I think the Andrea Bocelli concert was around round 3 of this season. We're at round 16 and still they're having issues because of that concert there. I've spoken to the Sydney Swans today who tell me that there is absolutely no way that game is being moved from the SCG. So we'll have to wait and see as to how that turf recovers from the game and just in general from what has been the last 3 months where it hasn't really shown many signs. The AFL has a turf doctor that goes in and checks on these things before every single game, and it was given the all clear. I mean, the ground would have to be knee-deep in water, really, for it to be moved or even postponed. But it's not even the water. That had nothing to do with water. That was just the surface-level turf, just giving as soon as a player changes direction. So be interesting to see what the turf doctor says about it. Well, there's one ground that is always in pristine nick, arguably the best ground in the country to watch footy at, and that is the Adelaide Oval, where Port Adelaide made a statement with a massive 50-point win over Carlton. We'll get to the Blues in a second, but Port Adelaide were really strong. Rosie, Butters on fire. Mitch Georgiades really took control of that Carlton defence that was struggling with no real impact from Jacob Wiedering, who was carrying that ankle injury. But Carlton, there's been so much criticism over their inside 50 entries, tactically at times, but often you can't question their effort. But that's exactly what was questioned on Thursday night, Kate. It just wasn't good enough. Yeah, it was. And this was the incident that sort of caused a little bit of I guess, passion and fight to break out for the Carlton Football Club. This is right on the stroke of half-time, and to be frank, this was the most fight that they showed in the first half. They conceded 8 goals to 1 up until half-time, and you'd think if that sort of happens, Adam Saad is out with concussion after that bump, and you've been able to sort of really, I guess, get into it and try and throw your weight around a little bit before half-time. You probably get a dress from your coach at half-time and you come out firing. That's what you'd hope. But this is the first 10 seconds of the third term. I want you to keep your eye on Willie Rioli at the top of the screen. First of all, the luxury afforded to Jason Horne-Francis out of that first centre clearance. Still looking at Willie Rioli. He is still completely unmanned. Still unmanned. The ball goes towards him, ends up taking the mark, rolling. This leads directly to a goal. Then we go on. Still, look at the time clock there. Still 17 minutes to go. So there's been sort of 2.5 minutes played. Just watch the ease of ball movement here from Port Adelaide. There's no pressure. There's no body on anyone at the Port Adelaide Football Club from a Carlton player. They've just done this uncontested all the way through, all the way into the forward line. Again, a player flies. Willie Rioli is at drop, front and centre, uncontested. Yes, brilliant finish from Willie, but no one's gone anywhere near him again. 2 players at the top of 50. This is still within the first 5 minutes of the third term. Horne-Francis has the ability to fumble it. They come in, Butters gets it, and the player that was at the top of the 50, Bergman, that was there at the start of that clip, is still there. So you think if you're going to show some fight at halftime, you'd probably come out and continue on with it. That was as far as it got for Carlton.
Well, off the back of that defeat, Brad Lloyd, the head of footy at the Carlton Football Club, fronted the press at Melbourne Airport when the team arrived back on Friday morning. He was asked quite pointedly if he could guarantee whether he and Michael Voss would be at the club next year, keeping in mind that Michael Voss, of course, is contracted for 2026. And I'd say that his response was telling of the position and the pressure that they are under right now.
Yeah, I'm unsure of that. Yeah, we'll just stick at it. Yeah, keep going to work for others to judge that. We've been going at it for a little while now, and we've had some good times and some down times like we are now. But yeah, there'll be change in different parts, no doubt, and there'll be parts that we just keep grinding away at.
It's damning that when directly asked if Voss is going to be there, only 2 minutes after preaching the party line of sticking fat and getting through to the end of the season, he can't guarantee whether he will be there, which brings us to Carlton's illustrious history, if you will, of parting ways with coaches. So my question to you, Kate, is, one, you look at Michael Voss, who has a win percentage of 52%. That's the most successful coach that Carlton has had since the turn of the century. But yet, with the list that they've created, it seems like they're underperforming and the pressure is so fierce. Is Michael Voss the right man to take them forward? And do you believe, whether or not he is the right man, that he will be there next year?
Yeah, I think pre-Thursday night game and some of the vision we just saw, I would say I was of the opinion, like, stick with Voss. He's someone that's been there. I think we've seen how often they've changed coaches. It has been a club that the pressure gets on them. They make a decision. It doesn't necessarily help the development of your players because of the rebuild that it puts you in when a new coach comes in. But I was concerned with the lack of effort and fight on Thursday night from Carlton players. I think if they were to roll out a performance like that again this season or in the coming weeks at least, that would really, I think, for me, highlight the inability for Michael Voss to, I think, get the best out of his players in that reaction. There was supposed to be, I thought there was going to be a response from Carlton on Thursday night. There wasn't one. They get Collingwood on Friday night at the G. If they cannot elicit some sort of response to that, that is a big question mark over Michael Voss's future and his ability to continue to motivate the playing group.
What a clash that'll be under Friday Night Lights, 80,000+ there with the season.
Oh, you're already excited about it,
aren't you,
Xander?
Come on, what a game it's going to be. Now, we go to the rest of the round now, and there's still a couple of games that spark a bit of intrigue left this weekend. We've got Richmond and the Adelaide Crows at the MCG, and Freo and St Kilda, the Ross Lyon Cup, if you will, at Optus Stadium. Kate, anything that you like out of these two matchups? Well,
don't forget last time the Ross Lyon Cup took place, they kept Fremantle to 33 points and St Kilda got the win. So what will we see over at Optus Stadium?
A showstopper, that's for sure. Now, that takes us to the Amy Classic Clangers series, which is back for 2025. And ahead of that game, St Kilda versus Fremantle, we've got Peter Bell back in the house, who explains the chaos, the famous chaos of Siren Gate.
We don't know who's won the game or drawn the game.
There were unprecedented scenes. The bit that blew me away the most was when Chris Connolly, our senior coach, he started striding purposefully out into the middle of the oval while play was going on.
Lenny Hayes, Connolly saying, get out of here.
It was absolute pandemonium.
Love that. And you can check the rest of that out across the AFL socials channels. Well, that's been the round so far for round 16. Thank you, Kate McCarthy. It's been great to be with you once again. Now, through the week, if you're looking for some more AFL content, check out the AFL's new podcast with Paddy Cripps, Tom Mitchell and Lachie Neale. That is On the Inside, the new podcast that's going to launch across the AFL platforms. Can't wait to check that one out. Thank you for joining us, and we'll catch you next week.